You're listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast, hosted by Dylan Dillo Smith, Midwestern Ontario one and only MMA podcast, where we interview MMA fighters and voice actors like Sergeant Frank Woods.
What is up, guys? It is Dillo, and welcome to another episode of the Dillo's Dojo podcast. I think this one is episode 6. I'm surprised I'm still keeping track of these. I'm bad at just keeping track of anything in general, but before we get into everything today, just wanted to list off the topics just for a new thing to start, only because, it's about time that I, give you guys what you guys are going to be listening to, probably in chronological order, so you know when to skip to if that's your thing. I really don't care. But we're going to start off the podcast just talking about something that little old Ariel Helwani did and his little tricks and, my opinions on Ariel Helwani. Then we're going to move into Dana White's Contender Series and LFA 90. So we'll be reviewing those both chronologically. So Dana White's Contender Series will be first, and then we'll go to LFA 90. But to start it off, we'll talk about the Ariel Helwani thing. And then in the later half of the podcast, we'll talk about last night. Yeah, as of recording this, it's last night. So last night's UFC event between Augusto, Sakai, and Overeem. There's a lot to talk about there. Not just what happened in the fights in general, but just what happened leading up to the fights. The whole event was just chaos before it even started. So we'll get into that. But to start things off, I wanted to talk about Ariel Helwani because I do like the guy. Don't get me wrong, he's a good journalist and everything, but he's also a shit disturber. While other journalists just kind of try to ask controversial questions, they don't try to churn fighters against each other. They just try to ask more personal questions. Ariel tries to churn fighters against each other and try to start beefs. And one of the biggest, most recent examples of this was on one of his most recent episodes of his podcast. He was interviewing Dustin Poirier, and they were talking about his upcoming fight with Tony Ferguson because now that's been official, and it's fucking awesome that's official. It's a great fight. They were talking about Tony as an opponent. So these are Ariel's exact words. I don't want to be putting words in your mouth, but do you think, or is it safe to say you think that Tony is overrated? And props to Dustin, because Dustin didn't respond like he didn't stammer over his words. He immediately called Ariel out on his bullshit. He immediately was just like, that's exactly what you're doing. You're putting words in my mouth. And that's exactly what Ariel was doing. He was putting words in his mouth. Now, my opinion goes as follows with this. In my opinion, it's like when you say, I'm not trying to be an asshole here, but my God, that clearly disfigured person is fucking ugly. I'm not an asshole, but I'm going to proceed to be an asshole. It's stupid. But he's a good interviewer. Don't get me wrong. He knows what questions to ask, but I've always had this big issue with him trying to play victim when fighters get mad at him for trying to start shit between other fighters. He plays victim whenever the UFC blacklists him from events, and when managers blacklist their fighters from going on his show. And now I'm fully understanding why. It's because he's just a constant shit disturber. He's been like this for years. It's just, as one of his fans, I was blind to it. But I don't like how much bullshit he tries to stir up and then tries to play victim when he's called out for it. And then last night, he particularly kind of made me mad just for something stupid. And it was surprising that he said something so stupid, because as someone who's been covering the sport for as long as he has been, and he's like the most well-renowned MMA journalist amongst mainstream MMA and the entire MMA community, right? So I was really surprised with the things he was saying last night during the Augusto Sakai Overeem fight. I think it was around the 3rd or 4th round. Going to his corner, Overeem decided he was going to sit not facing Augusto Sakai, but facing the cage towards his corner. And I don't know what was with Ariel last night. Like, I like Reem. I wanted Reem to win. I'm happy that Reem won, but for some reason, Ariel was just on Reem's balls last night. And was just praising every tiny little thing that Overeem was doing, especially this. These were his exact words for the tweet. Overeem is such a savvy veteran. Nobody in MMA has ever turned their stool around. Mind you, these are round stools, no back on them, like just straight up stools. You set them down. Doesn't matter which way you sit. It matters what way your body's facing, right? He's first off praising Overeem for apparently churning his stool around like it's a fucking chair and sitting and facing his corner. And then he proceeds to say that it's the first time anyone in MMA has done that, and that he's way ahead of his time. Not knowing that earlier in the night, Montana De La Rosa actually did the exact same thing because she was tired. And, I've seen many fighters when they're tired and they're getting advice from their corners do that. Whenever their cutmen, their ice guys, their water guys come into the octagon, they turn around at their coaches who are outside and they're facing them. It's something that fighters do when they're tired and when they don't want the opponent to see the motions that their trainer is giving them to give away a weakness or a game plan or something. And here Ariel is just completely deep-throating Overeem's balls, saying that Overeem is the first guy to have ever done this, and he's such a savvy veteran, and he's always ahead of the game. Then, as soon as he gets called out, proceeds to praise the gym that Overeem is using for training, despite, like I said before, many MMA fighters doing this in the UFC. I've seen this many times before in my quite a few years watching this. I've seen many fighters do that whenever they're going back to their corners. So I just don't know what was up with Ariel yesterday, but he was just on complete retard mode, I guess I could say. And I don't know, man. It's starting to show that he's just super biased as a journalist, and he's starting to become more and more of a sleazeball as a journalist. Now, I don't like it because he's corporate now. He's got a job at ESPN. It's because he's been doing what he's been doing. I have a feeling he's going to throw Daniel Cormier under the bus. I love DC and Helwani. Sorry, I almost said DC and Cormier. That's the same person. But I love DC and Helwani. It's a great podcast. I listen to it at work all the time. I always listen to his interviews with the fighters that he uploads every Wednesday. But I just don't like how Ariel's been acting recently. He's just been very shit disturby, and as of recently been very dumb and biased with his takes, almost like the UFC commentary. I don't know if it's because as I become more and more hardcore of a fan, or I'm just noticing more and more things as I'm coming to, maybe I'm just realizing this and it's been like this for all this time. But I don't know. I just feel like as of recently, the commentaries have been biased, and especially Ariel Helwani and his journalism and who he talks about and who he brings on his podcast and stuff like that. So I don't know, man. I like Ariel Helwani, but he's starting to lose everything he had as a journalist. And he's just becoming super biased and super dumb. And it's kind of like another podcast I listen to, PKA. Two guys on it, Kyle and Woody. They used to watch UFC all the time, and now they're just complete casuals, but they talk as if they know everything, and it's just really upsetting. And I feel like Ariel's going down that point. He's soon just going to go completely to basketball reporting, and he's just going to just not care about this sport, or just stay casual and be like, I'm going to cover the UFC only, and I'm going to have my biased takes. And it's just a little upsetting to find out or to realize. But anyway, let's move off of that note, and we'll move on to Dana White's Contender Series. This one is week 5 of season 4. And we only had 3 contract winners this week. We'll get to those in a bit, but I wanted to talk about the fights first because, honestly, there could have been a case that all the winners should have got contracts. But, despite that, they got, the ones that didn't get contracts got invites back in November when they're apparently hosting another Dana White's Contender Series. So that's going to be great. But I wanted to talk about the fights because every single one of them were awesome. There was people executing their game plans and making it fun while at it. There was people who were bringing it back and forth, great finishes. Just, it was a great night of fights, honestly. And I'm excited to talk about it. So we'll talk about the first fight that happened that night, which was Shane Gibson versus Tucker Lutz at lightweight. And the first round, honestly, it was close. These two guys were coming into it hungry for the contract, obviously, and the first round was close. Tucker Lutz had Shane Gibson eating some good shots, but then Shane Gibson started, fucking pummeling Tucker Lutz a little bit and pushing the pace, and then that was just the story for the whole round until the very end of the round where Tucker Lutz got him to the ground as he pushed him against the cage and started to ground and pound him. And it was a strong finish. So honestly, I had it as Shane Gibson's round, but it was honestly, to that point where if it went to Tucker Lutz that round, it wouldn't have been one of those situations where I've been mad. I could have made so many arguments that Tucker Lutz won the round because the way he started it, the way he was defending against the strikes, and just the entirety of the pace, just kind of handling, pushing the pace forward and everything. And then the way he finished the round on top in the ground and pound position, and he kind of had Shane Gibson in trouble. It was, I don't know. It was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, Shane Gibson pushed the whole pace and controlled the octagon for most of the round, but Tucker Lutz had that very, very good start and made, the fact that Shane Gibson was pushing the pace more competitive. And, like I said, that finish was probably the thing that would have swayed the round in the judges' eyes. But going into the second round, it was clear after that Shane Gibson just started to kind of like slow down. He came out strong, pushing the pace, then got taken down, had to defend against a couple things on the ground, a lot of transitions, then got mounted and ended in the ground and pound position. And it was clear that he just couldn't figure it out, and he was starting to get a little tired. So Shane Gibson started to slow down coming into the second, and the whole round, man, Tucker Lutz just went in with his boxing. It was just piece after piece, many combinations or single shots. They would go to the body. He had some good body hook combinations that were landing, and I thought, eventually if he lands one of these, he's going to put Shane Gibson down, which he didn't, but it probably contributed what happened later on in the rounds, in the third round, because Shane Gibson couldn't figure it out this round. He was getting pieced up, and a lot of the shots were going to his head and his body. And, body shots really do a lot of damage. It doesn't knock you out, but it can slow you down. It makes it hard to breathe. You just, if you hit that right spot or hit it enough, your fucking body just wants to shut down, and you can get a TKO via body shot. So, it's like the second best thing to be hitting when you're boxing. But yeah, no, Tucker Lutz just went in with his boxing and just was piecing Shane Gibson up the whole round. So it was a clear 10-9, maybe even a 10-8 round in some people's eyes for Tucker Lutz. But then Tucker Lutz, like I said, came into the third round figuring it all out. Shane Gibson was tired. Tucker Lutz had him on the ground, had him hurt on the feet, had him in so many submissions, and he actually tried to chase the finish because his corner was yelling that he needs to chase the finish to, get a contract. And he was chasing the finish. He was, getting Shane Gibson wobbly against the fence and stuff, but mostly it was all ground and pound and like submissions on the ground. And as he was trying to chase the ground and pound near the end, he nearly got submitted by an armbar from Shane Gibson. But luckily enough, I believe, if I remember correctly from Tuesday, he got out of it just in time, or the time ran out. But the whole round, it was pretty much just Tucker Lutz chasing the finish, trying to get the ground and pound TKO and the submissions. But as he was chasing that, he got too, how do I say this? Too greedy, and he almost got submitted. So he almost lost the fight, but overall it was a 10-9 round. And then we went to the judges, judges scorecards. Fuck, can't talk, man. So we went to the judges scorecards, and all of the judges saw it the same way. It was 30-27 going to Tucker Lutz. So that was the first fight of the night. But then the second fight of the night, we had two big boys. It was the biggest boys of the night because we had no heavyweights, just light heavyweights. William Knight versus Corey Brundage. And this fight started out swinging. They both came out Corey Brundage, I guess, felt the power of William Knight, and then came just grappling with straight hot fire. It just ended up being high level wrestling. No Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, just straight up like wrestling transitions. Both of these guys trying to take each other down. It was like I was watching an Olympic wrestling match with strikes. And then it got to the point where he had William Knight, like Corey Brundage had William Knight flattened out on the ground on his stomach, and he started pounding William Knight into the canvas, just ground and pound, just hook after hook after hook after hook, and then tried to go for the rear naked choke, but William Knight actually got his arms and started squeezing his arms, and eventually he started to slowly kind of get up, and he reversed it and got out of the grappling exchange, but then they started to grapple against the fence again, and as Corey Brundage was trying to chase the takedown, William Knight just starts landing these like near 6 to 12 elbows, not 6 to 12, so they weren't illegal. They were legal, but those elbows that are kind of 6 to 12, but they're more like 1 o'clock to like 7, maybe. I don't know how to fucking name some of the elbows, but he started landing vicious elbows from that grappling position because Corey Brundage was chasing the takedown against the fence, and it's a little harder to chase the takedown against the fence because you got your back against the fence, and it's more of like you're trying to take his legs out to make him sit on his ass. It's harder to kind of make them go on their back. You have to push them away from the fence. So William Knight used that to his advantage and started elbowing poor Corey Brundage. After like maybe elbow number 2 or 3, it was clear Corey Brundage started to like slouch and he was going limp. And then it just kept coming. They got to the ground. And next thing you know, Corey Brundage is sitting against the cage. And William Knight is just beating the living fuck out of him. And that's when the ref steps in. So after almost getting finished in round 1, William Knight comes back and just miraculously TKOs Corey Brundage with like the brute strength, and just, it was brutal. It was fun. And I loved watching it. And I wouldn't be surprised that later when I name the contract winners, he might have gotten a contract or he might have not. But my God, he definitely had Dana White on his feet. It was pretty fun. Going into the next fight, though, we had little bantamweights, and I say little with a little bit of hesitation because Ronnie Lawrence was little. He was a 5'8". He was representing short kings. But then we got this douchebag who's like Domingo Pilardi, Jose Johnson. And he's like 6 foot coming in here. Why aren't you in featherweight, you fucking tall string bean? So he comes in here trying to pick on the little guy, trying to make short kings not feel good, like trying to take away the short kings weight classes. Get the fuck out of here, tall guy. But they came in here, and from looking at it, he was an actual favorite. This Jose Johnson guy, this 6 foot guy coming into this fight. Ronnie Lawrence was an underdog, and going into and looking at all the stats, the weight, not the weight, but more the height and the reach advantage. You would have been like, oh yeah, it's obvious. Ronnie Lawrence is gonna get fucking murked here. It's gonna be a knockout. Gonna be just gonna be Jose Johnson completely piecing him up. That's not how it went at all. It started out like that, but once Ronnie Lawrence learned how to close that distance, it was all wrestling from here. And usually when people wrestle fuck, it's not fun. But Ronnie Lawrence was chasing submission after submission, ground and pound after ground and pound. And all the transitions were quick and fast and just constantly going. And it was great because he was defending transitions, transitioning crazily to just different positions. And he was always attacking, always moving. He wasn't making it boring. It was more high-level grappling than anything. And it was so high-level that, yeah, Jose Johnson was doing good defending the submissions and some of the ground and pound. But on his back, Jose Johnson couldn't really do a fucking thing until Ronnie Lawrence started to get a little bit more fatigued. And even then, Jose Johnson could barely, reverse or anything because Ronnie Lawrence was just that good. He had such a sound game set because once they got to the feet too, he started to piece up Jose Johnson by closing that distance. And that's how he set up his takedowns against the fence or, just to the canvas. It was amazing. And honestly, it was probably one of the best performances against the tall guy I've seen. And it was so satisfying to see. I was a little more biased coming into this fight because I just have this big irk when it comes to tall guys, like 6 foot guys being in bantamweight. It's the same as I think Louis Samoka, who's like 5'11", 5'10", maybe 5, yeah, I think 5'10", and he's in flyweight. He's 125 pounds. It's like, really? You're going to try to fucking kill yourself with that weight cut just so you can get the advantage on people? Like, that's sad, man. Fight at your own weight. So I was pretty happy to see that happen. He just completely dominated and nullified Jose Johnson. It was fun to watch. It was like, woohoo! I was so happy to see it. But the next one, we had some more grappling too. We had some more grappling in the next fight. We had Jimmy Flick, which is like one of the greatest names ever, versus Nate Smith in flyweight, pretty much my weight class. And this was a fun fight because it was constantly Jimmy Flick, another high level grappling. Jesus Christ, what's wrong with me today? But it's another high level grappling bout. And again, this time Jimmy Flick just chased submissions, but it was submission after submission after submission after submission. And every submission was deep and in there. And like, it was obvious Nate Smith was going to tap, but Nate Smith, man, just has like the most incredible defensive grappling I've ever seen. Not just he's like, not getting out of positions. He was bad at that, but just defending those submissions. He was always calm and collected and was just defending them so perfect. There was a fucking point. There was a fucking point where he had I think he was in an armbar or something, and he rolled and he kind of like bent his arm this inhuman way where his hand was like bending. I don't know how to explain it, but it was the weirdest looking way that an arm could ever bend. Definitely an arm should not bend that way. And he still got out of that submission and ended up fighting till another round. I think that was in the second round. And then in the third round, more submissions from Jimmy Flick until an arm triangle just comes. And he just squeezed tight enough and managed to just finally wear down Nate Smith's defense, where he just let the choke through and he had to tap. But it was just one of those fights where you see the high level grappling and the constant attack of submissions and ground and pound. It's just fun to watch. So it was a great submission from Jimmy Flick, great performance. But honestly, Nate Smith shouldn't be disheartened. He should, I believe at the end during the contracts, Dana White said he's going to be coming back in November, which he should, because he showed a good defense on the ground. He needs to work on getting up and, his transitions and his escapes and stuff and his reversals. But his submission defense is really good. He was really deep in those submissions to the point where I thought he was going to fucking submit very early a lot of the time. He just, kept it cool and let his one time let his arm pretty much break and then popped it back in as he was just fucking like rolling to the next side. It was crazy. It was a fun fight to watch. But after that, we had the final fight of the night, which was between Dennis Bazookia. It was like Bazookia. I'm gonna go with that. Yeah, Bazookia. And Melsik Bagdasarian. Damn, these are hard names to remember, man. But anyway, this fight was awesome. I'm just gonna say this now. I'm gonna spoil it for you guys. I don't think either of these guys won a fucking contract, if I remember correctly, but they definitely won the chance to come back to the Contender Series because they both just brought it. It was a back and forth fight. It started off with Bagdasarian just almost 10-8ing poor Bazookia, because he was just coming out with these heavy punches and these combos where it was just like him exhaling viciously with these heavy punches. And surprisingly, though, Bazookia was eating every single fucking punch, man. It was like none of them were going down. And that's the thing. Bagdasarian's known for his high level striking, his like knockout power and stuff. And he was just giving it his all, just looping all these hooks and like these heavy jabs. You could hear him exhaling, the leather hitting so loud. And Bazookia is just, nah, no big deal. I'm just going to take my breaths and keep going. And then in the second round, because he did that, Bagdasarian was a little more slower and he was more tired. He was starting to show fatigue, but so was Bazooka, but more Bogdasarian in this fight, like this round. And that's when Bazooka just started putting in the work. He started grappling and pushing him against the fence, constantly pushing the pacing control in the octagon, similarly to how Bogdasarian did in the first round, and was just piecing Bogdasarian up and holding him against the fence, holding him onto the ground. I think he landed at least 2 takedowns in that round and just started to tire himself out and tire Bogdasarian out more. So we had the rounds 1-1 going into the final round of the main event of this of the Contender Series, and both of these guys had to bring it, and they tried, man. But it was clear that Bazooka was so tired, and Bogdasarian was just so rejuvenated. He wanted this contract more than anything, so he came out and, just like round 1, started to piece Bazooka up and started to chase a knockout finish. But unlike round 1, he was more tired. His punches were becoming a little bit more telegraphed, but he was pushing the pace very good on a fatigued Bazooka, and really took advantage of that, and then started to out-grapple Bazooka in the third round, similarly to how Bazooka landed the 2 takedowns or the 1 takedown in round 2. Bogdasarian ended up landing his own takedowns in round 3, so that ended up getting him the round. And both guys ended up going to decision, and obviously Bogdasarian ended up winning the fight 30-27 and 29-28 from 2 judges. But he did not end up getting the contract, which was very upsetting. But the people who did get the contract were William Knight, obviously. That's why I kind of, I kind of ruined that for you guys. It was just such a nice finish, like a comeback finish almost, that I just had to spoil it. But then Ronnie Lawrence, because of his performance against Jose Johnson, he was such a big guy. He was known for his knockout power and his crazy striking. He just completely nullified and made this guy his bitch. He ended up getting a UFC contract, and now he's in the bantamweight division. So it's gonna be fun to see what Ronnie Lawrence does. Same with William Knight in the light heavyweight division. Now that John Jones is gone and things are shaken up, but then the last one we have is flyweight, and it's Jimmy Flick. Yeah, Jimmy Flick got a contract after 3 rounds of trying to chase a submission, which honestly I'm not surprised he got the contract, but I was happy he got the contract. Jimmy Flick got the contract, and then, that was the 3 of them. So it's going to be exciting to see those 3 in the octagon sometime soon, hopefully filling up a fight card. Maybe not so much Ronnie Lawrence, because he took a little bit of damage in his fight, but William Knight and Jimmy Flick should be ready for another fight soon. So it'd be nice to see them, all 3 of them, honestly, in the octagon. But the next one I was going to talk about was LFA 90. This one went quick, and before I say this in every podcast I talk about LFA. LFA is the greatest feeding organization to the UFC, and this is the reason why. Their main event was between Zavayed Lavishvili and Ricky Steele for the bantamweight title. And Lavishvili is 12-0 with 8 submissions. And there's a reason why, boys. He is like Khabib 2.0 kind of. Only because his grappling is incredible. Once he gets you down and he's on your back, he'll chase the submission, and you can't get back up. He's so commanding. He's so demanding. And that's exactly what he did to Ricky Steele on Friday night. He just kept chasing the rear naked choke until he finally sunk it in so deep after Steele just gave up fighting the hands because he couldn't anymore. And he ended up becoming the bantamweight champion for LFA. So that's why I wanted to say that they're a feeder organization, because I'm expecting to see Lavishvili on either Dana White Contender Series or in the UFC, honestly. I see him either, debuting in the bantamweight division in the UFC against a low-ranked opponent, maybe even Merab, giving Merab a fucking run for his money. Battle of the Georgians. But I wouldn't even be surprised to see him on the Contender Series. Either way, he's getting a contract in the UFC. He's got an incredible record, incredible grappling. He just completely dominated Ricky Steele in that fight. And obviously, there's also the other factor that LFA is one of the biggest feeding organizations for the UFC. Despite what casuals think it being Bellator, no, it's not at all. It's, organizations like Titan FC and LFA. So with that being said, I got past the first half of talking about Dana White's Contender Series and LFA. We had great night of fights with Dana White's Contender Series, and I'm hoping for this Tuesday it's going to be the fucking same. But anyway, without further ado, I suppose we'll get into this week's UFC events. A lot to talk about, folks. So, as I was saying in the first little bit, there's a lot to talk about in today's UFC event, or not today's, but last night's UFC event. A lot of changes were made, and we lost a lot of fights leading up to this event. And I'll just give you the timeline. But before I start, we only had seven fights last night. And that was the first time in 15 years since 2005, since the Ultimate Fighter 2 finale, that we had only 7 fights. And it was all televised, which was awesome. We got it all on the main card, so we didn't have to switch to prelims or anything. It was all on one card, which, as expected, there wasn't really much for prelims. It was most of the prelim fights we lost anyway. And a lot of the prelim, some of the prelim fights were even moved to the main card because we just completely lost bouts in general. But I think there was 10 fights supposed to happen, and we lost every single one. We lost 3 of them. Every single one of those 3 we lost completely. So to start it off, we actually had a fight between Macy Chiasson and Sahara Eubanks, or Sarge in Charge, as she calls herself. And Macy Chiasson ended up pulling out due to undisclosed medical reasons, I believe. So she had to pull out of that. And then she ended up, I think Sahara Eubanks got matched up with somebody else, but ended up having to pull out, I think, a couple of days before the event because of complications due to her weight cut. So her bout got moved to, I believe, next week's card, which is Michelle Waterson versus Angela Hill, which is going to be awesome. A lot of people are sleeping on that card, but it's going to be beautiful. Or maybe that's not happening next week. Maybe I'm just an idiot. But anyway, I'm excited, and that's going to be a great fight. But anyway, that one got pulled from the card. So that was the first fight that we ended up losing. And then we lost Ricky Simone versus Brian Keller. Brian Keller stayed on the card, but we lost Ricky Simone due to, I believe, COVID. And Kevin Natividad was pulled from a matchup on the day of the event, so he had to pull out, and so we lost that. We lost Kevin Natividad's bout, but Kevin Natividad stepped in for Brian Kelleher, and then so we lost the Kevin Natividad bout because he had to step in to fight Brian Kelleher, and then he had to pull out because of undisclosed medical reasons, the day of the fight. So Ray Rodriguez came in out of nowhere like Superman and took that fight. But then, nothing happened, just in 2 fell swoops, because Jalen Turner had to switch opponents, I believe, to Thiago Moises, I believe. And so once that happened, Thiago Moises had to pull out of that fight. So Jalen Turner got scrapped from the card. And then all of a sudden, we had this heavyweight fight between Marcos Ruggiero de Lima and Alexander Romanov. And de Lima has to pull out for the same kind of reason. So all of a sudden, Alexander Romanov has to be pulled from the bout. So there we go. We got 3 bouts right then and there, gone from the card. We're down to 7 now. So we're sitting here, we're like, what the fuck is happening? And we were expecting some crazy ass shit, like it wasn't going to go on or some stupid shit like that. But no, it went on. The fight ended up going on. It ended up being televised as a main card, main event type, type deal. It started off with Hunter Azure and Cole Smith, who are both great in their own right. And it was a great way to start off the card. Both guys brought it. It was a back and forth contest, mostly striking, but a good bit of grappling too, but a lot of clinching, a lot of striking. But it was a very close fight too. It went from, I believe, Cole Smith had the first round. He, pushed the pace, managed to clinch up against the cage and just, push that pace and control the octagon. And then in the second round, Hunter Azure started to figure it out and started to piece Cole Smith up. And so both were going into the round. It was 1-1, or maybe I'm talking the other way around. Maybe Hunter Azure performed that way in round 1 and, Cole Smith round 2. But going into round 3, it was 1-1. And both guys just wanted it. Both guys were trying to finish each other. But Hunter Azure was just the one chasing the finish more and managed to squeak out the 10-9 decision and ended up getting the 29-28 decision victory. And it was fun to watch, honestly. It was a great way to start the card. It's one of the reasons why I love watching the little guys and, the women's, because they're smaller, they're faster. The pace is always fast and always like fireworks. So it was really fun. But moving on from that, we had Vivian Araujo, or Araujo, however you want to say her name, versus Montana De La Rosa. And I thought I had Montana De La Rosa winning in this fight, but Araujo just kept piecing up Montana and did a great job defending herself on the ground when she got taken to the ground. It wasn't long when Montana De La Rosa would get her to the ground. Araujo would find a way back up, or Araujo would, reverse it or get Montana De La Rosa to the ground and start controlling her. And it was pretty much just Araujo on the feet the whole game, the whole fucking time. And she was just piecing up De La Rosa in the face. And by the end of it, De La Rosa's fucking nose looked broken. It was bloody. She was breathing out of her mouth. She was so fatigued. She was just being pieced up. It was a great performance by Vivian Araujo. And, a more one-sided fight, but still nonetheless a great fight to put on the card. And it kept the fast pace going. So then that brought us into another bantamweight fight, which was the Brian Keller fight I was talking about. And he's up against Ray Rodriguez. So this could go either way. It could be an easy finish because, it's an opponent he's not used to or he hasn't trained for. Or it could be a long competitive fight where Ray Rodriguez might end up squeaking out the decision win because, like I said, it's a guy he hasn't trained for, so he doesn't have a game plan for this. Well, no. Brian Keller, my lord, Brian Keller just came out swinging and then forced Ray Rodriguez to go for a takedown. And as Ray Rodriguez went for that takedown, man, you got to protect your neck when you go for a takedown against Brian Kelleher, especially when it's not a double leg and you can't control his legs from wrapping around you. If he gets that neck, he's fucked. You're fucked. So he got that guillotine so tight. And within 39 goddamn seconds of the first round, submitted Ray Rodriguez via guillotine just because Ray Rodriguez took him down. It was so quick, but it was so fun too. And then going into the next one, we had 3 submissions in the row, by the way. So this was the first of one. Going into the second one, we had Barboz Fabinski versus Andre Muniz. And I thought Fabinski was going to win this. But Andre Muniz just came in and just, they got to the ground. Both of them were grappling. It was kind of like a wrestling match. But Andre Muniz managed to get, I think, on the bottom. He got trapped on the bottom, but got an armbar so quick. And that armbar was so tight and so deep. And it was almost like a verbal submission, kind of, as he was squeezing it out, like he was stretching it out. It was almost like Fabinski yelled, and that's why the ref stepped in. But yeah, no, it was a deep armbar. And it was quick too. It was I think under 3 minutes in the first round. That's at least what I'm going to remember. I can't remember if it was 2.5 minutes in or if it was a little bit more than that, but it was a quick submission. And that led us into our third submission, which was more of a fun fight, man. And the submission came out of nowhere, which was why it was the best submission of the night. I mean, obviously Brian Kelleher was going to get submission of the night bonus, but easy second would have been this one because, like I said, the submission came out of nowhere. So, Michel Pereira versus Zelim Imadaev. And this fight was constantly back and forth. And it was like mostly striking between these two. Because Imadaev is a wrestler and boxer, and Michel Pereira is more of a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy and kickboxer. So these guys were striking on the feet. There's Michel Pereira doing his crazy, wacky Pereira things like he always does. Doing the Showtime kicks, Superman punches, pretty much break dance kicks. I'm kidding, obviously. He's doing capoeira kicks and stuff like that. Big, heavy shit. And it was clear that he was starting to fatigue himself a bit. But he kept that pace going and just managed to squeak out each round on Imadaev. It was do or die for Imadaev in the third round. Imadaev got caught, and he was starting to piece up Michel Pereira, but near the end of the fight, like near the end of the round of the third round, Pereira started to really piece up Imadaev and really force him to kind of go to the ground and everything. And that was like the biggest mistake Imadaev could have made. Imadaev literally just tried to take him to the ground, got reversed. Pereira got his back, and just like it was nothing, got a rear naked choke quickly, just out of nowhere with probably I want to say less than probably 21 seconds left on the clock. So he was already coasting himself to a very dominant decision with his striking and stuff. But then just out of fucking nowhere, he just manages to get this rear naked choke slapped in quick, and nobody was expecting it. On verdict, it was 0% for people to get the third round submission with Pereira. Everybody was expecting a knockout or a decision. It was just one of those moments where it was like, whoa, where the fuck did that come from? But it was awesome. It was a great fight. Both guys brought it, and it was made even more fun because Michel Pereira just did his crazy ass wacky shenanigans like he always does. And sometimes fans love a little bit of showmanship when it comes to fights. You don't want to see it too much where it literally hinders a fighter's performance, but I think Michel Pereira got that with his last fight because he fatigued so fucking fast by doing backflips and shit. So this fight, he kind of kept it to a minimum, but he was still doing his wacky power moves and stuff. And it was fun to watch. You didn't expect, you didn't know what he was going to be throwing next. So it was really fun to watch. And especially with that submission at the end, it came out of nowhere and it was just awesome. So it was a really enjoyable fight. And that led us into the co-main event. And before I get into what happened in the co-main event, I'm going to talk about it. This was supposed to be originally happening 2 events before this. I believe it was a co-main event for another fight night card, and OSP actually had to pull out due to COVID-19. He tested positive for COVID-19, had to self-isolate, do the things a guy has to do to, keep his family safe and keep others safe from this virus. And he did that successfully. And it got scheduled for this. And leading up to this event, a lot of people were iffy about this fight because everybody was thinking, does OSP still have COVID? What if he's still got, little tiny symptoms of it and he tests positive even though he's, feeling better? What if he gives Alonzo Menafield it or some of the staffers it because, he doesn't know that he's sick and then his whole team has to self-isolate? Just a lot of questions. We were just wondering what was going to happen. But this was OSP's first fight back to light heavyweight since, I believe, a fight against Ilir Latifi or something. But he went to heavyweight against Ben Rothwell. He had one fight at heavyweight against Ben Rothwell and got dominated, but took a lot of good shots and did not go down and showed his durability and showed that he might be a little bit outweighed for heavyweight, but he can stand with the heavyweights. And it was a great fight, seeing what OSP could do at heavyweight. I honestly thought he was going to manage to submit Ben Rothwell, but it's Ben Rothwell. The guy is just a big brute. He's got good grappling. He's so strong. He's got that one-punch knockout power. Like I said, in that fight, OSP took a lot of good shots. So it was a case of, how durable is OSP? Because Alonzo Menafield coming into this fight was on I don't know how many knockout streak, and he was just constantly starching contenders in the light heavyweight division. So a lot of people saw Alonzo Menafield coming out with the win on this one. But me, I was team team OSP to the end. I just saw him getting a submission. But anyway, going into the fight started off as normal, what you'd think. OSP was mostly backing up, backpedaling, countering shots. Alonzo Menafield was trying to feel himself and try to get his positioning in, trying to close the distance, trying to get his shots in. Round one was more of like a feeling each other out round for a little bit. Both guys were just kind of like moving back and forth in the octagon, moving each other back and forth without even striking, just more throwing strikes here and there, seeing which way they can hit, what their opponent's style is, what they have to figure out, the typical things that you do in round one. It was really tactical until near the end when Alonzo Menafield started to kind of push forward, and OSP, I think, got him to the ground or something like that, and got him into a Von Flue choke or something close to it, like some type of submission. And Alonzo Menafield defended really good, really well, and he got out. So going into the second round, everybody was like, oh shit, what is OSP going to do? Alonzo Menafield starts coming forward. He's starting to feel himself now, and so is OSP. Both guys are comfortable now. OSP starting to get his distance, starting to counter really well with his shots as Alonzo Menafield's coming in. Alonzo Menafield is starting to push the pace with his shots, starting to land some body kicks, some leg kicks, but OSP starting to damage him with some leg kicks as well. So as the round goes on, all you see is Alonzo Menafield moving forward towards the cage, pushing OSP up against the cage, and then you don't get to see it with the naked eye until you see it for a second time, but OSP just lands this fucking shorthanded punch that just catches Alonzo Menafield on the fucking chin. I think it was a left hand too, and just drops Alonzo Menafield on his face like a sack of potatoes. And it's the same thing in boxing. Once you see a guy land face first and he doesn't get up right away or anything, he's just laying there, he's done. There's no need for a 10 count, and there was no need for extra shots. So the ref stepped in right away, knowing that Alonzo was just KO'd. And it was honestly one of the more surprising finishes of the night. I know I said that Pereira's was because, the submission just came out of nowhere, and it did. But that knockout, we know that Ovince St. Preux has that power, but that knockout came out of nowhere. It was kind of reminiscent of Fabricio pushing Stipe backward and Stipe catching with a counter right and dropping Fabricio flat on his face and winning the heavyweight title. It's kind of like akin to that. That's what I thought anyway. But yeah, it was a very surprising finish, and good on OSP for that. It was a great return to light heavyweight for him, and it was a good showing that Alonzo Menafield is up there in contenders, but he needs some time to work on himself, and he needs to work better on his defense when he's pushing forward, because he left his chin open a lot, it seemed, and it was a good fight to watch. They both brought it in the second round until that knockout. The knockout just kind of came out of nowhere. It was like in the last minute of the fucking fight, I guess. And it just came out of nowhere, and he just went face first like a sack of potatoes. It was fucking interesting. But anyway, good on OSP. Tough luck to Alonzo Menafield, but he'll be back. It's just a setback for a guy like him. He'll be back. But now we're getting into the main event of the evening, which was a heavyweight bout between Alastair Overeem and Augusto Sakai. These two guys are surging heavyweights. Alastair Overeem being the veteran, and he's just a great fighter. He's been doing this for 21, 22 years. He's been only one of two UFC fighters to win fights in 4 decades. Sorry, not 3, 4 decades. He won in the end of the 90s. He won in the 2000s. He won in the 2010s, and he won in the 2020s. This is the only one of two guys that has done this. He is a veteran in this sport. He's also got a lot of kickboxing experience, and because of his MMA experience, he's got a lot of grappling experience as well. So there's that. But a lot of this has to do with just how experienced he is in general in the cage, and he's just got a lot of fights under his belt. And to surprisingly put it, he's like 41, and he's still on a run to the title. And that's what a lot of people were kind of hoping for coming into this fight, was this was just going to be another notch in the title run for Alastair Overeem. But then in the other corner, people were iffy because we have I think he's like 14-1. We have 14-1 Augusto Sakai, who's undefeated in the UFC, has only lost once in his career, and it wasn't in the UFC. He completely put away top contenders of the heavyweight division like Marcin Tybura and fucking Tai Tuivasa and just other people like that, man. Just great heavyweights that, got in the contenders mix, very, very close to being a top contender. And he just put these guys away like it was nothing. So going into this, a lot of people were like, I don't know if Alastair Overeem's chin is, good anymore. It's shot. But a lot of people were forgetting he just went 5 rounds with Yair Rozenstruik in his last loss and was cruising to a decision, like a close decision win, until Rozenstruik knocked him out and split his fucking lip like wide open up to the goddamn nose. Jesus Christ. But yeah, he nearly won that fight. And he took a lot of shots from Yair Rozenstruik. And he withstood it. It was just one shot caught him. He got dropped. And the cut was so bad the doctor had to put an end to the fight. So it was a TKO. It was like in the final seconds of the fight too. Like I said, he was coasting his way to a decision victory. So a lot of people are forgetting that. Yeah, he's been knocked out pretty easy, but I always say this with a lot of people. It's heavyweight. You're bound to get knocked out with a simple little punch. Unless you are literally fat, unless you are actually butterbean fat with no muscle in your arms, you're going to get knocked out at heavyweight. These guys throw massive punches, probably punches that could fucking take down walls, man, like drywall. These guys punch hard. So obviously, you're going to think that, people like Fabricio Verdum, who's gotten knocked out in a couple of his last fights, and Alastair Overeem here, who's gotten knocked out in a couple of his last fights, you're going to think they have glass chins, but the reality is they're fighting big boys with big power, and all it takes is one shot. I mean, as is with MMA, all it takes is one shot to end the fight or change the course of the fight, and that is way more even so with heavyweight. So a lot of people were forgetting that. But anyway, going into this fight, a lot of people thought that Augusto Sakai had what it takes to be a top contender and beat Alastair Overeem. And I got to say, he brought it. In the first round, he actually, it was more of a feel-out round the whole entire round. It was them just kind of prancing back and forth, trying to figure out their distance and, what their opponent's going to do, that type of shit. But there was a couple strikes thrown near the end where, he almost got Overeem with those shots. And it was pretty close to being stopped at a couple times near the end of the first round, but it was mostly just a feel out round. Overeem took the shots really well and just, got out of the way very, very well in the first round. But then the second round, they started to heat up. They started to actually strike with each other. More strikes were being thrown. A lot of body shots from Overeem's direction. And I was excited to see that because, like I said before, Overeem's a kickboxer, and I wanted to see a lot of this. I was very interested to see how well he was going to do against a Brazilian Muay Thai kickboxer, because that's what Augusto Sakai is. He's not a grappler, he just has grappling experience for MMA. He's a Muay Thai boxer, and he wanted to see what Dutch Thai boxing is like and which one was better. Well, it was a close fight, because in the second round, they started to really showcase their kickboxing skills. It was very vicious leg kicks to each other, body kicks, clinch work, knees to the body and the head constantly. It was just nonstop that. It was just a constant pushing back and forth from Augusto Sakai and a little bit from Overeem. And then in the third round, it was a back and forth fight between the two. They were just tiring each other out, but Overeem just showed that he had the more experience and started to really utilize that and started to keep his distance, and then also close his distance and use his weight to tire out Augusto Sakai some more. And then near the end of the third round, he started to take Augusto Sakai down. Well, going into the fourth, he started to piece up Augusto Sakai and tire him out a bit more of the strikes and started to take him out a lot more. And that's when Alastair Overeem realized this, because as he started to take him down more in the fourth round, he started to land this vicious ground and pound that was just hurting Augusto Sakai and tiring Augusto Sakai out. And he just kept landing it over and over and over again. So every now and then Augusto Sakai would get up, even though it looked like he didn't know what the fuck he was doing. But every now and then he'd get up. And then after a couple moments of striking between the two and Alastair would push the pace, Alastair Overeem would take him down again, start with that, those body shots and constant transitions, leaning his weight against him and, throwing those elbows and those shots. And it just started to add up, man. Those shots started to add up, and Augusto Sakai was in trouble. And he ended up the fourth round on the ground being elbowed to death by Overeem, and he was in very big trouble going into that fifth round. It was clear when they were going back to the stool, both guys were exhausted, but Augusto Sakai was hurt. It took him a while to get up. He was a little wobbly going back to the stool, and it was obvious he had took some big shots on the ground there. So both guys were, figuring out a game plan, but I think it was obvious at this point to Alastair Overeem. It was take down Augusto Sakai. He can't do anything with your groundwork, and ground and pound him until the ref stops the fight. Well, yeah, that's essentially what happened. We went into the fifth round, and not even like 15, 20 seconds into the fight, Alastair Overeem takes him down and starts elbowing him into a bloody pulp. And that, like, with only a couple shots, I want to say like 2 elbows or 3 elbows and then like 4 hammer fists. The ref steps in because Augusto Sakai wasn't defending himself. He couldn't get up. He was hurt. He was taking huge shots. He was hurt from the fucking round before. It was obvious that it was over. And it seemed like even though Alastair Overeem was exhausted, he was the fresher of the two fighters because he's been in this point before. He's been in main events before. Augusto Sakai has only trained for these main events before, but Alastair Overeem has been in dozens of these main events. So it was more of like a war of attrition and a war of experience. And it really showed. And it was really surprising to me because I was really happy to see Overeem start another title run. And I'm excited to see what's next for Overeem. I would love to see him against Walt Harris or something like that again. Even like a little bit of a top 5 contender spot. Maybe even welcome Jones into the heavyweight division with Overeem. Just have a nice kickboxing match between the two. But I would love to see who Overeem's going to go up against next. And I'm glad to see that it's not done for Overeem yet. He's like 40, 41 years old, looks incredible. Looks like he's in incredible shape. And he's still got that longevity to last 5 rounds. He's got that experience to kind of conserve his energy and adjust his game plan to win 5 rounds. Because going into that fight, it was either 2-2 going into the 5th or 3-1 Overeem going into the 5th. There was no possibly 3-1 Augusto Sakai going into the 5th. Augusto Sakai easily won 1 round, maybe 1-2, but Overeem was just dominating the later half of the fight. Rounds 3 and 4 were Overeem's easy, and that 5th round would have been Overeem's if he didn't finish it easy. He would have just been taking down Augusto Sakai and holding him there the whole time, but nonetheless, Overeem showed that his experience was much more handy in this fight than Augusto Sakai's youngness, his youth. And it was really an enjoyable fight to watch. It was a heavyweight fight that you definitely wanted to watch. There was no wrestle fucking. It was straight up just 2 guys standing and banging, trying to knock each other out. Even on the ground, Overeem would just lean his weight against Augusto Sakai and then try to fucking put him to sleep with punches and stuff. There was a couple submission attempts. It was just a fun fight all around. For only 7 fights, man, this card delivered. It was a nonstop fun fight card, man. I was actually really happy, really satisfied with the fight card. But anyway, I've talked about this long enough. That's what happened this weekend. And next weekend, I believe we have... I mean, feel free to correct me. I'm stupid, but I believe we have Angela Hill versus Michelle Watterson next weekend. But I'll see you guys next weekend because I believe we also got some Titan FC and some more LFA to talk about next weekend. Definitely got some more Dana White's Contender Series to talk about next weekend because that'll be week 6 to talk about. And I'm excited for that because these fights have all been delivering so far. Some great guys have been getting contracts. So I want to see who else is going to get a contract. But I will see you guys next week with LFA, Dana White's Contender Series. Obviously, I'll be back with the UFC event for next week and possibly predictions for UFC 253 once I figure out who the fuck I want to win. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe you wait until the week after that, but I will see you guys in the next episode. I hope you guys enjoyed listening, and I hope you guys enjoy yourselves where you guys are watching this, whether it's at work or at home doing chores. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed listening, and I will see you guys in the next episode.
You've been listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Keep in touch with Dillo on his social media at Dillo Ross on Twitter and Dillo Ross on Instagram.